finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Well, we've got through the Christmas season.
And there's one episode left before we ring in the new year.
Correct. So this one is a little bit different. It's much lighter. It is very fun.
And it is, I would call X-rated.
Well,
for
it's
mature audiences only.
It's not X-rated in that regard. It's just, it has very strong language because we are interviewing Vic Ferrari, who is a former New York City police detective, and he speaks with the candor, the delight, and the saltiness of a retired New York City police detective. Enough said. We do respect our audience a lot, so we just wanted to kind of give you a bit of a warning because we know we have people from all different walks of life that listen to us, and so
yeah, there's a lot of swearing in it. So
it's not for kids, but it's really funny. And I
wanted to be mindful of that. Not X-rated. It's not raunchy, dirty. There's just a lot of F-bombs.
Yeah, and there's some adult content. I mean, he's a cop.
Right.
It's pretty.
So we wanted to give a fair warning, but I'm sure the X-rated got people's attention, so they're either going to listen. Even more so?
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. And then you say X-rated and it's like we have Instagram pictures where we're naked. So like whatever. Covered, but
people are supposed to discover those on their own. Yeah. Anyway, before we dive into the show, I want to just mention our sponsor this week, which is Steelhead Fitness in Sweet Home. Thanks for sponsoring this episode. They got a little word for us on their recording. So take a listen to that and maybe visit the gym in the new year and get back in shape if you're not doing so already.
You want to be around for your loved ones. You want to stay active, go places, have fun. Your health plays into your quality of life. Why not get your health moving in the right direction and get fit with Steelhead Fitness? Exercise is preventable medicine. There's so much to gain. You'll feel better, be more active and vital, you'll lose weight, and have a healthier mental outlook. Steelhead Fitness provides everything you need. A friendly, helpful staff, a clean, safe environment available 24/7, and a variety of options to fit any lifestyle, including cardiovascular fitness, strength training, group fitness classes, senior programs, and nutritional health, plus personal training, state-of-the-art tech, and free introductory programs for new members. We're a fitness center for the whole community. Steelhead Fitness is dedicated to your success, so you can be around to live life at its best. Get moving. Come in for a free trial today. Steelhead Fitness on Main Street in downtown Sweet Home. What's your reason to be fit?
Okay, welcome back. We're doing a Doctales with cocktails.
Yes.
I'm drinking whiskey out of a brandy snifter. I hope that isn't bad form.
You brought out the old Olympic cups from 1988.
1988 Calgary Olympics. Look at that.
Look at that. I think they're collector's items. They're worth a lot more than we are.
Yeah,
combined.
They may be. They may be. Anyways, we are super excited. We have author of 6 books, Vic Ferrari, who was a former New York City Police Department detective, and he has unbelievably great and hilarious stories. We're going to share a drink with him and have an excellent time and hopefully laugh and talk about something that doesn't start with C and end with D.
This is going to lift your spirits, make you laugh. So sit back and grab a cocktail and laugh with us.
All right. Welcome, Vic. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences, and let's dive into some, funny ways to die and stupid stuff that cops have done.
Sure. And Tim May, I'd like to thank you for having me on your show. I greatly appreciate it. My name is Vic Ferrari. I'm a retired 20-year member of the New York City Police Department. Born and raised in New York, lower middle class kid, grew up in the Bronx. When I was a little boy, my mom used to take me to the movies, which was around the corner from a police station. As a little kid, 5, 6 years old, I gravitated to the police cars. I used to watch the cops, the way they'd walk in and out of the police station. Every little boy focuses on that gun. And I'm like, I want to get my hands on one of these things one of these days. By age 10, my friends and I used to sneak into the local post office and steal the FBI wanted posters off the wall. And then we'd go around the neighborhood with wanted posters, right? Like we'd go into the local deli and there's some poor AT&T repairman getting a sandwich. And we're like, could be that fucker right there. I knew what I wanted to do at an early age. And by 20, I took the police exam. By 21, I went into the police academy. I had a wonderful 20-year career with the NYPD. I worked in a lot of different units. I worked in plainclothes 15 out of my 20 years. I worked in the narcotics division. I worked in an anti-crime unit, DUI unit. And my last 10 years, I worked in the NYPD's auto crime division. So it's anything with chop shops, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, changing vehicle identification numbers on cars for resale. After a 20-year run with the NYPD, it was time to go. I retired relatively early at 41. And bored out of my mind, I got into writing. I've written a series of 6 books, 4 of which are about the NYPD. All my books are a humorous behind-the-scenes look of the characters that I worked with, interesting criminals, things that went wrong, embarrassing moments. There's some dark stuff in my books, but for the most part, it's humorous and funny things that went on with the department.
Well, I was just surprised to hear that there were chop shops in New York City.
Like shooting fish in the barrel. You got to remember in the 90s, New York City averaged 150,000 stolen vehicles a year. So, I mean, if you just rode around and you ran plates, you were off to the races rather quickly. You know, you'd be in a car chase.
Wow.
Yeah, we have been to the city. We actually had a motorhome and drove all the way across the country in 2013, and we went to DC, and then we interesting story. Speaking of chop shop, we got into New York City. We were using the shortest distance possible on Instagram, or not on Surrey,
Okay.
Apple Maps, which is an idiotic thing to do when you have a 40-foot motorhome, because it took us through Hoboken, and there was no signs that said how low the bridges were, and we tore off the air conditioners.
Oh shit!
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was horrific.
on July the 3rd. So there's all these people partying, and we're trailing a debris field of air conditioners through all the revelry that is. Yes.
Yeah, we hit the first bridge, and then I was screaming like someone had lifted the roof right off of our RV, because that's what it sounded like. And then he's like, "We got 2 more to
Well,
go."
I can't imagine
Like,
being in a
stop,
car chase
stop.
in New York City. That's
Well, we weren't allowed to chase stolen cars, but we did. That's like the dirty little secret in New York. I don't know what goes on now. I've been retired 15 years. But if you got into a car chase with a stolen vehicle and you put it over the radio, the sergeant would play dumb and give you a little bit of time to see if you could catch the guy. If the chase started getting out of control and, they can track the distances you're going just by where you're putting it over where you are. If you caught the guy and nobody got hurt, no harm, no foul, no one was going to give you a hard time. If the bad guy got really fucked up, or God forbid a civilian got hurt or a cop got hurt, then they'd look to hurt you. You're talking about losing vacation time. Nowadays, you probably lose your job. But yeah, we used to get into car chases all the time.
wow. That yeah.
Sounds like your dream job, Tim.
Well, it
Speaking of-
does. It does.
I was just thinking Tim's living his best life through this podcast, because he wants to change his name to Timothy Corvette. And then
No, I mean,
about the time when he sped to an emergency gunshot wound at the hospital, they told him to come as fast as he could, and he did.
Yeah, 150 miles an hour on a public road. It was awesome.
And they
had
had
a
roadblock waiting.
They had a
for him.
roadblock waiting for me when I got into town, and the guy, like, he took out his mag light and flipped it around like a club, and he was like, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a doctor." And they said, "Come as fast as you can." Actually, it was amazing that the guy survived. He took a rifle round to his groin and exploded his femoral artery, and it was hours before he had a pulse in his foot. So we kind of assumed he's going to lose his leg. So we did what we could in the rural hospital. The surgeon was very skilled. We, buttoned this guy back together, got circulation back. He got tons of blood. And then we sent him up to Portland to the tertiary care hospital, and they did nothing, and he was fine. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. And obviously he was fine because I was driving 150 miles an hour on a public highway.
That's got
obviously
that story's got to go in a chapter in our book.
Yes.
future
Well,
book.
you guys as physicians, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. There's always outliers that make no sense. Like I saw people that got shot in the head and the bullet would hit here and travel around the base of their skull and exit. And they're running around and it's like, I'll tell you a wild story. Early in my career, right? I'm a rookie cop, South Bronx. You ever see the movie Fort Apache, The Bronx with Paul Newman?
No.
I don't. Okay.
It's a famous 80s movies about the South Bronx. They filmed it in my precinct before I got there. But I mean, burned out. They used to call it Fort Apache. By the time I got there, they called it Little House on the Prairie because it was all burned out, abandoned building. Never forget this. It's a Sunday morning, and there's this crackhead in a nightgown, right? She's standing in front of the desk of the precinct, and she's just motherfuckering the desk officer. And we used to call this guy the general because he was an old paratrooper. I think he was in the Korean War. And he's writing, and she's motherfuckering him across the desk, and he couldn't take it. He goes, Ferrari, Faye, remove this crackhead from the station house, right? So we grab her arms and she's like, fuck you, blah, blah, blah. Incoherent, just carrying on, right? We toss her out of the station house. About an hour or so later, we go out on patrol. We get called to the hospital for a gunshot victim, right? We go to the hospital. We go into the ER, right? There's our crackhead laying on a gurney and she's yelling and screaming, right? She got shot in a calf with like a 22. And I forget if the bullet stayed in or went right out, but like she was walking around with it. So the doctor pulls me aside because she sees us and she's like, she starts going off on us. Those are the two fucking cops that threw me out of the precinct when I got shot. And I tried to tell, like she was incoherent, right? So the doctor goes, you're not going to believe this, but this woman thinks that you guys threw her out of the station house when she was trying to make a report as a gunshot victim. Like, oh, come on. You're going to believe that? Like, can you fucking what are we going to do? You know, like, yeah. So it's the shit that goes on that people would not believe. You probably, you could write books about just the wild shit that she's walking around with a gunshot. She wasn't even limping. You know what I mean? So there's no rhyme or reason sometimes.
Not when not when you're cracked out and methed out like that. You're just vibrating around in your own little hovercraft.
Yeah, no, it really.
How about that Narcan, huh? I'll tell you, when they hit, that's like something people would. That should be like a Netflix series, like something of Narcan, like just to watch them. You got somebody's got foam coming out of his mouth and nose. His eyes are back, and they hit them with that, man, and it's like. They become like a demon because the opiates immediately are neutralized and they're like in the throes of withdrawal. So they went from being dead to withdrawal, like, and they're fucking throwing up all over the place. I mean, people wouldn't believe this shit.
Yeah, it's like Linda Blair rose from the dead all at once.
Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, except worse because it's a 220-pound, 6'2" guy that's now super pissed off and in withdrawal. You know, at least Linda Blair was still a child when her head was spinning around.
True that.
Yeah, and she could blame it on the devil.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, but boy, I tell you, some of those drugs, it's hard. I mean, like the manifestations that they have, you kind of like, do I need to get holy water or do just the Narcan? Because it is insane what it does to people.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dust is worse. Have you guys ever seen someone that was dusted?
No, thank goodness.
You know, when we moved here, it was crank. So it was kind of the low level, almost the biker kind of real terrible amphetamine. And then it gradually improved in quality. So, you know, you had real crystal and then that switched all to heroin and fentanyl. So we never really none of the
we were out of the ER kind of at that point in our career. So we weren't.
And even when we were in Canada, it was weird because when we were in Canada, a lot of the drugs of abuse where we worked and where we trained were heavily in the Native American population, and those were all pills.
Yeah.
But they would inject the pills and then they would be, then they'd get
or they'd huff. It was all huffing and that kind of stuff.
And that stuff is
cheap.
Like instant liquid brain, you know, like the salt, the glue and gasoline and it's just terrible.
I saw a 60 Minutes thing when I was a kid and they were on an Indian reservation. And I watched this woman on 60 Minutes. She had a can of Aquanet hairspray and she held it sideways. She punctured it with a nail and a rock and drank the Aquanet.
Yes.
I couldn't believe because of the alcohol content. I'm like, that's got to fuck up your liver. I mean, even as a kid, I knew that.
Well, no,
when I was a kid growing up, because I lived on the Great White North of Canada and we were close to reservations.
What were you, 56th parallel? 57th parallel?
North of 54. But you couldn't, things like Blotican things, not just spray paint, but Lysol, all of that were behind the counter because it was common for them to just go in there and exactly what you said.
Well, so
poke a hole in the can.
get this, like, you know how,
but even I was going to say, even recently, my sister's an ICU nurse, and she worked in an area where there's a giant native conglomerate population, and they could not even have that, the hand sanitizers in the hospital, the spray foam that you hang on the wall. They had to get rid of them because they were stealing them all and popping those and drinking them straight.
Well, right. Like
this is like 2 years ago.
So you know how you go into, certain parts of the country, like you go into, most of Los Angeles, you go into a Napa and all the spray paint is locked, right?
Right.
Well, they did that with Lysol and vanilla extract in the northern parts of Canada.
Right.
Yeah. If you're a baker, you need a special license to get vanilla extract.
I'm just making muffins.
Here's my ID.
So it's crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, did you guys have to so when you're medical trained, did you guys have to do autopsies?
Oh, yes, we did. In fact, the craziest, not a lot of them in our career, but in medical school and training and some of the summer externships that we did and that I did, it was bizarre because literally people would come into these little tiny hospitals and then they would die. And I just remember, then next thing you know, you're in the morgue with this creepy ass guy that looks like something from Frankenstein down there. He's like all weazened up and eating a sandwich with his bare hands. And we would open up the body and do the autopsy on the lady that died the night before and figure out what happened. It's nuts.
In my book, I think it's NYPD Through the Looking Glass. There's a story in the police academy, right? They want to get you used to you're gonna be working with the dead at one point or another, right? So they took my company of 30 of us. They bring us down to Bellevue Hospital, which is it's a big hospital, and that's the morgue for Lower Manhattan. So I remember growing up watching Quincy, right?
Yeah.
You got Jack
exactly.
standing next to like a fucking slab, right? And there's a sheet over the guy, right? We went into the basement of Bellevue. It was like a fucking Jiffy Lube, like there were bays, right? And like there's 8 slabs and they're cutting, you know what I mean? And between each slab, remember we were kids, like your mom would go to the produce and there'd be like that produce scale, like she'd weigh a melon or like a head of lettuce. They're pulling out organs and fucking, there's a guy with a clipboard writing shit down, right? And they're fucking cracking jokes like, oh, this guy's a moron, but he's only got like a 1.2 pound brain. And I'm just watching. It's like a fucking horror movie. There's a guy there with like a wigger tool that you cut muffle pipe. Like nowadays they're stealing catalytic converters. And they're sawing the back of their heads and pulling the face off. And then they don't stitch people up like you think with a needle and thread. They use this like black fucking thick shit to close people up. And I remember like there was a gunshot victim. He was like hogtied and shot multiple times. And you got an ME there, and he's got like this tool. It looked like a needle nose plier, and he's pulling bullets out of entry wounds, and he's dropping it in this tin thing. And you got some detective hanging over his shoulder with an Egg McMuffin and a coffee. And the detective goes, well, what do you think? And he goes, suspicious suicide. And they're all laughing. And I'm saying, this is a fucking horror movie. Like, I've never seen anything like this before, you know?
It makes me laugh just because it takes us, well, at least me, back to days of gross anatomy lab at school when it was similar, not quite this all the volume and drama, but it was the same kind of stuff. We had old professors that literally would do the dissections and eat their sandwich over top of the cadavers. And we used to do things I'm even afraid to say on the air, that we would prank each other with organs and stick them in each other's lockers.
The best was this, right? Because these people were like in formalin, right? So they're completely,
pumped full of preservatives,
pickled in formalin. And the prank to do would be when you're dissecting the female pelvis, and the pelvis is unbelievably complicated. Like there's tons of nerves and vessels and all these, fascial planes and whatnot. And somebody would be down in there and they'd be trying to figure out exactly what muscle group it was. And because these people were literally completely immersed in formalin, you reach over and you push on the bladder. You get a little squirtage whilst they're in the middle of the pelvis. Yes. Yes.
We like when I was a rookie cop. So like in New York, if someone dies in their residence, right? The police arrive and they do a preliminary investigation, right? And then the detectives come, they start investigating it. The paramedics are the ones that tell you he's dead. And then you got to wait on the medical examiner. Now in New York, people are croaking naturally, unnaturally all the time. So you can sit, we call it sitting with the DOA. You can be sitting in an apartment with a dead person for 8, 10, 12 hours until some guy shows up and says, yeah, call the funeral home, natural death, or no, you know what? We're going to take this to the morgue. We want to take a closer look at it. And rookie cops always get fucked because the old timers in New York, that you got to remove their possessions, like any valuables. You got to go, see if they got a wallet. And, I mean, the amount of times I've been in someone's apartment and if someone died, and you guys know this, the bigger the person, the bigger the mess, and you got some large overweight person that died in their bed a couple of days ago, those gases fill up.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to throw a sheet over them and kind of give them a rock and get back and then let them pop and ooze. And, it's disgusting. And the old timers used to show us, like, after you knew that it wasn't a crime scene, rummage through that kitchen and see if there was coffee, and then pour coffee grinds in a pot and then burn the pot on the stove. And the smell of the coffee would mask, the decomposition smell. So there was a lot of tricks. We used to carry the, what's that shit that my mother used to put on my chest? Yeah, I hated that stuff.
Yeah, Vicks Vapor Rub.
Oh.
We still use that, especially in doing colonoscopies, etc. Yes.
I got a colonoscopy. I got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy awake. I am so afraid of that. No, I apologize. So I wrote this book.
No problem.
Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways to Die. I'm terrified of anesthesia. I had it once as a child. I never got over it. So when I was going, I'm in my 40s, I got to go for a colonoscopy, and I'm dancing with this guy, the gastro guy, and I'm going, can you do it while I'm awake? And he goes, why would you want to do it while you're awake? I go, because if someone yells fire, you could pull the cable out of my ass and I can run out of the room. I go, I don't want anesthesia. And I got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy awake, and both times the room was full of people because everybody wanted to see what it was like to have someone that was awake. You know what I mean? And I was like, it was so weird. I'm laying on my side and the nurse was a guy. He looked like Meatloaf. And I'm just kind of staring at him. And he's like, all right, your sigmoid colon looks all right. And your sigmoid colon is like a cul-de-sac. And like, he had to kind of go around it. He's like pumping me up with air. And I'm like, oh, but I mean, I did it. I was a trooper.
Trooper, you're a badass.
No, so we like
that is not
I
fun.
like the anesthesia because they use the Michael Jackson juice, that propofol, the white stuff, and it is a great sleep. And like I went on November 8th, like literally election day. I went, and because I have Paul, I have to go every 5 years or whatever.
He's a Garden of Eden. In his colon.
So I go there, and they're used to people just they're literally scared shitless, and I don't care. So I go in and I said, that anesthesia better be good because I have a 2-drink minimum for butt stuff. And they just lose it. They're like, this is great. We're we're gonna have some fun, But yeah,
I was terrified. You can do anything to me while I'm awake. Like if I needed surgery, as long as I don't see it, you got to do something on my knee, throw a sheet, give me a book. I can hang with anybody, but I'm so afraid of anesthesia. I mean, obviously at some point in my life, I'm going to need it, but
good for you. I mean, if you can avoid anesthesia, there's always risks with anesthesia. It's small, but it's there. So I guess if you're tough enough to bypass that risk.
When they walk into the room and they tell you anesthesia is safe and effective, then you should be terrified.
Although I'm thinking in the job that he did, I'd be more scared of walking down the street of New York City with criminals than anesthesia. So what the heck?
This is exactly what I told the gastro guy, because he was just fascinated that I was that afraid of it with my career. And I said, look, if you told me there was 2 guys holding up that liquor store over there, I could go in there and I know I'm coming out on top. That's my mentality. I says, I know nothing what you're going to do. If I got to choke you, you know what I mean? Like I want to be in control of my own body in case something goes wrong.
That totally makes sense.
So you have a chapter in one of your books called what? In Sickness, Health, and Fat Bastards. Is that correct?
Yes. In my book, NYPD Law and Disorder, which is about a lot of things that go wrong in law enforcement. Yes. It details. So in New York, we hire in bulk. So a typical police academy class in the NYPD is anywhere between 250 cops to a large class could be 2,500 cops, because the NYPD is between 35 and 40,000 members at any given time. So we hire in bulk. And once you pass that physical, which wasn't that difficult at all, you're in. And once you get through the police academy and you get off probation, it's like being in the mob. You're a made member. No one can take that away from you. And, you know, some cops eat themselves out of their uniforms, and it's sad and it's embarrassing when you see overweight cops and you say to yourself, come on, how is he or she going to chase somebody? And
exactly.
Yeah,
you know, I was just saying that
they're
earlier.
going to shoot somebody.
But that's always, of course, the joke. Cops with the donuts and being overweight, and people even still to this day we're like, how is that possible that there's not standards, or that how are you going to chase somebody and look like those cool guys on TV that are running after the criminals?
Well, different departments have different policies. New York, like I said, you're not going to get canned for it. You're just not. I was a police officer after I retired from the NYPD. I became a cop down here in Florida for a short period of time, and they were definitely more stringent. Different departments down here, you have to pass an obstacle course once a year. You know what I mean? So there are different places, different things. But with the NYPD, once you were in, you were in. And there's a story in my book. I did the 4 to 12s early in my career, and our police cars run round the clock. You don't take them home. They run round the clock. And there were 2 female cops that worked the day shift, and we shared the same car. And my partner and I would get the car at 3:30 in the afternoon. And every day, the backseat of the car was like a fucking shopping spree. There were McDonald's bags, Dunkin' Donuts bags. It was like a smorgasbord buffet of where these 2 were grazing the whole day. Both women were well over 200 pounds, probably closer to 250 pounds. And in the 90s, the NYPD, we used to use Chevy Caprice vehicles. Chevy Caprice vehicles had the bench seats, a long bench seat. And these 2 women were so overweight that every time we get a new police code within a month and a half, their tonnage would break the supports on the seat. So the seat would rock back, right? So my partner and I, there was a dairy that was in our precinct, and we asked them, we borrowed a couple of milk crates, and we would shove the milk crates in the back seat. So when my partner and I went on a heavy call and we slammed on the gas, we didn't wind up in the back seat. But then, like, it's embarrassing. So you get an arrest, and you got to take the milk crates out of the back and throw them in the trunk, and then put your prisoners in there. What wound up happening with these 2, well, they were useless, and no one really liked them because they were that lazy. One afternoon, I happened to be working a day shift. I got into a chase with a burglary suspect, and I'm chasing him down Broadway. I'm putting it over the air. And I see the 2 of them, they're out of the car, they're writing parking tickets, and I see one of them adjust their radio. So it's obvious she hears there's a chase coming down Broadway. I ran past them with the kid, and she didn't do anything. And I cursed at the 2 of them as I was running by, caught the kid, locked him up, bring him into the station house. 15 minutes later, the 2 of them come in, and I lose it. I'm screaming at them in front of the desk, you know, you 2 pieces of shit, you know, you're lazy, blah, 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 blah. So the sergeant was like, not here. So he separated us, and he goes, what happened? And I told him, and he says, they're going to get somebody hurt or killed. So what he did was he took them out of the radio car, and he put them on foot at opposite ends of the precinct of each other in hopes that it would motivate them to lose weight, you know, but it didn't. You know what I mean? He got transferred. They wound up working back together, and round we went. But yeah, there is a lot of that with the New York City Police Department, with, you know, unfortunately, with overweight cops.
Yeah, which is interesting because, you know, our son's Air Force, and he said, you know, even if you're a lieutenant colonel, you still have to meet some standard of fitness for your, you know, age. You know, it's amazing because you see these guys interviewed that, you know, even a lot of these retired military guys that have been in for 20, 25 years, and largely they're in pretty good shape. You know, not all of them, but a lot of them are. And it's sad because I have two good friends I used to skydive with that were policemen for, you know, decades. And these guys were just in impeccable condition. I mean, they prided themselves in I'm going to be the fittest 40-year-old. I'm going to be the fittest 45-year-old. When I retire, I'm going to be one of them was on the SWAT team in Portland for virtually his entire career until he retired at 50. And he still could beat most of the recruits that came in to SWAT that were, almost half his age. So, I mean, I was like, yeah, that's what you want. I want a policeman that when I see him, I'm either really relieved they're there because they're going to be able to kick ass and take names, or I'm really scared that they're there because they're going to be able to kick my ass and take my name. I mean, that's kind of what
you don't want a cop to show up that you might have to defend them. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Or resuscitate them, as the case may be.
Yeah,
it's happened.
It's mind blowing. It just makes me think that it's almost more dangerous in some ways because they can't chase, they can't outrun, run.
Well,
and
yes.
How are they going to protect people? You're right. Then you're protecting them. It's not safe as much as it's funny. But we have the same thing in the medical profession, and we talk about this all the time, and it ticks us off to no end because we're the worst people in the world. You walk into, there's some medical clinics we've worked in where there's not one single, other than us, like person that's got a BMI under 30. Everybody's just as big as a whale. I hate to say it. And what does that, I mean, you're coming in as a patient and it's a health profession and everybody's massive and out of shape and eating crap.
If you see a doctor and they are, obviously very overweight, you should not take their advice. That's my advice.
And it's the same thing with a cop. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to them for help, and then like me going to a doctor, and the guy is grossly obese, and you're saying to yourself, well, he's not taking it seriously. You know what I mean? Like, does he have my best interest? He's not taking care of himself. What am I to him? You know what I mean?
Especially you got like a group of 7th grade boys that could outrun a criminal and take him down when you got Big Mac lady there. Tripping over rappers. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, unfortunately, the NYPD, it's civil service. Again, like I said, different departments have different standards, but with us, I mean, at least until I retired, once you're in, you're in. No one's gonna,
the one thing I did notice, and I think we were in the financial district. I can't really remember, but when we were in New York City, what I really, appreciated was that there was an obvious on foot police presence. This was 2013. I'm not sure if that's changed, but I liked that because, here we live in the country, and even though Oregon is as blue as can be, we still have it's changing, but we still have reasonably liberal gun laws. So I can protect myself out in the middle of nowhere, which makes sense. It's going to take, a half an hour or more to get a sheriff's deputy to me, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, okay, if you're not going to have, concealed carry in New York City, and, you can debate that however you want, that's fine. But at least there was policemen. Like, you go a block, you go 2 blocks, you're going to see a couple guys, walking the beat. And I was like, wow, this is really impressive.
Yeah. Manhattan, I mean, I think Manhattan and Brooklyn have the most police precincts. And they do. They call it omnipresence, and like places like the financial district, Times Square area, we have a lot of tourists. They want the police there because that's bad for business, right? If tourists start getting screwed with, or you get these tragedies, no one's going to want to come to New York. And especially now after 9/11, the financial district definitely is a target. So you've got a lot of cops on foot down there.
So I have to ask the question, even though it might seem silly, the whole cops with donuts thing, where does that come from? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, cops work around the clock, right? And, as we get older, we need our coffee. And I was never a coffee drinker until I was in my late 30s. My old partner got me involved with coffee because I used to drink tea. And he goes, you're an adrenaline junkie, drink coffee. And I go, I hate the taste. He goes, you'll get over it. And I did. Cops love coffee. It keeps them awake. It keeps them alert. Coffee places love having cops there. They're not going to get robbed. If they're in a bad neighborhood, you got drug dealers that'll sit inside and pitch crack or coke or whatever inside the place. If the cops are there all the time, that's not going to go on. They're not going to get messed with. Unfortunately, it's not just about the coffee. Like we were talking about, that percentage of cops that are overweight. You've got those sugary sweets there, and they're going to go for it. You know, I love coffee. I drink too much of it. That's probably why I have insomnia. But that's where that goes. You know, cops just love coffee. It keeps them going.
Makes sense. That's just like surgeons in the doctor's lounge.
Yeah, that's what my friend said.
Thing.
They said you're not doing police work without coffee because, you know, you might have an intense day. You arrested a bunch of people, like whatever. I don't know those details, but I know you go back to the precinct and then you have a ton of paperwork to do, and that's less fun.
But now we got
chasing bad guys.
We got Red Bull, Zen, and Magic Mind.
I just thought of a great story the two of you guys are going to love. So when I first was a detective, I'm working in an office and there was a guy there. He was in his early 40s. We used to call him TikTok because he could go off at any minute, right? The guy was a fucking idiot savant. He would sit there and bang out the New York Times crossword puzzle in 20 minutes while simultaneously answering Jeopardy questions.
That's your hero, Tim.
Short of that, he had no common sense whatsoever, right? And he was a nice guy, but he was just like an oddball. I'll tell you a quick story. He would smoke cigars in the office all the time. And next door, we worked next door to Vice, and there was an old-time detective that didn't like the smell of cigars. He complained. They told TikTok to stop smoking cigars. TikTok had this tick where if he got mad at somebody, he would throw his finger in the air and go, "That motherfucker," and stare at you as if you were the person, like, take it easy, relax. Well, when TikTok found out that this guy ratted on him, he went into the Vice office and took his typewriter and threw it out the window. Anyway, TikTok had the worst diet of any person I'd ever seen in my life. He's a mid-40s man at the time. He drank 8 to 10 cups of coffee a day, and the only thing I ever saw him eat was pizza and Jamaican beef patties. That was it, right? So one day we come into the office, and he's hanging over his desk, and he's like, oh, and we're like, what's wrong? And he's like, my stomach, I can't move. Me and another detective grabbed him. We threw him in a radio call. We rushed him up to the hospital, right? So we get him into the emergency room. We get him past the nurse, right? Get him past Checkpoint Charlie. Doctor's seeing him, right? And he's asking him questions, right? He's like pushing on his stomach, and he goes, when was the last time you had a bowel movement? And TikTok goes, I don't know, about a week. The doctor grabbed him and they dragged him in the back. I don't know if they shoved something up his ass or gave him a laxative, but he was so fucking backed up from this diet of coffee, Jamaican beef patties, pizza, and cigar smoke that he virtually vaporized.
That happens all the time. Unfortunately, we've seen it. In fact, the last one of those wasn't too long for me, and this elderly gentleman came in with his wife in a severe abdominal pain, and I thought, oh, this guy could have something really bad. Next thing I know, I ordered some X-rays, and the nurses were complaining, and they're like, the bathroom, the stink coming out of there, this smell is coming out of the door, and the guy saunters back into the room. He says to me, I think I cured myself. And he walked out with his wife, and he left a big mess in the bathroom and a smell that he left behind.
Well,
but, he was so plugged up, but he just
and then he needed
took
like
a big dump,
a new pair of pants.
Yeah, took a giant dump.
He shit himself into a new pair of pants,
and away he went. And we did nothing. I'm like, well, okay, that was pretty
good
crazy.
job.
Anyway, what else you got in your chapter on crazy medical stories?
Crazy medical stories. So when you become a cop, now things have changed. Drug testing in the NYPD now, from what I understand, they pull hair, right? And with hair, they can go back months to see how long you were using drugs. In the good old bad days, when I got hired, it's called the Dole test. So to get into the police academy, you've got to go through all this screening and stuff. So I got summoned on the day of the drug test. They summoned 100 of us to the health service division, right? And I'm in a suit and tie, right? And short hair, and they're ordering us around and taking X-rays and doing all these tests. So now first they tell us to strip down. They separate the guys and the girls, right? And we're in our underwear in this room. There's probably about 75 guys in this room, right? And there's a guy with a clipboard following a doctor around. You drop your drawers, and he's going up, groping everybody, turn to your left and cough, right? And I'll never forget this. Like, I'd never gotten checked for a hernia before. I'm like, do I have a hernia? Like, how does this even work? And I'll never forget, like, the guy next to me, like, we were known by numbers. Like, the guy in front of me was 74. I was 75. He goes, 74, cough. And you hear, he goes, cough again. He goes, what number are you? 74. And they fucking pulled him off the line. I guess he had a hernia, right? Then they go to the drug screening thing. So they march us into the bathroom 10 at a time, and we get these 2 little cups with twist on tops, right? We go into there's 10 urinals, right? And 10 supervisors walk in with us. So I'm like, what the fuck? Now, I don't like peeing in front of people. I've always been gun shy with it. I don't like it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't pee when there's people around. So I'm like, this is going to be a fucking problem. So they march 10 of us up to the urinals, right? Tell us, go up to the firing line and fill up the 2 cups, right? The supervisor is standing over my shoulder, like in the NFL, like he's going to block a kick. That's how close he is. And when I look up, over my head, there's a mirror. There's 10 mirrors over each urinal at a 45-degree angle that if he can't see over your shoulder, he's looking at the mirror to look at your penis to see if you're filling up the cup, right? And I'm like, oh, my God. And I'm pushing and I'm pushing and I'm pushing. And there's guys coming and going with their liquid cups of gold, and I'm still standing there. I can't squeeze out a drop, right? Finally, I push so hard, I let go with a fart into this guy's crotch, and he starts screaming at me. He goes, you want to fucking hurry up, kid? And I'm like, boss, I'm so sorry. So this old-time detective pulled me off the line. He goes, what's wrong with you? I go, I can't fucking pee in front of people. He goes, do you drink coffee? I said, no. He goes, drink now. And he kept feeding me coffee until finally all hell broke loose, and I was able to fill up those goddamn cups. So in the NYPD, right, when they dole test you, they probably dole test 20 people a day in the NYPD, maybe more. I don't know exactly, but it's almost like an episode of Mission Impossible. Every morning, supposedly, it's randomly done. These 20 or 50 people get drug tested. Each precinct has a computer in it which pops out a printout, and it'll say, selected dole testing, Detective Ferrari with my tax number. You're on the clock. At some point during the day, you could be hunting Osama bin Laden. You could be undercover. They don't give a shit. You have to, at some point during that day, you've got to go out to Queens and fill up these 2 cups. And I mean, on one time I was up in White Plains, New York, which is out of New York City, working on a multi-jurisdictional case. I was going home at 9:00 at night and some idiot forgot to give me the notification. I almost got fired. And they're like, hey, you got to get dole tested. I'm like, shit. I had a race from White Plains through the Bronx into Queens, find parking. Like I just pissed under the wire, literally. But the reason they're so paranoid about it is they caught so many people that were using drugs sneaking in with prosthetic penises. They caught one guy. He had a French's mustard bottle filled with piss, with a tube running through his pants, coming out of his crotch, like to fill it up. So like when he would go like this to squeeze, it would fill up the cups. So, I mean, unfortunately, when it used to be, they could only drug test you for cause when I first got hired. But about a year or 2 into my career, they went with the random thing. And it was like, I couldn't believe how many old timers got doled because we had a lot of leftovers from the Vietnam era. When I first got hired, and a lot of these guys, not all of them, and I don't mean everybody that was in Vietnam wasn't right, but some of the people that I saw around in my time period were not. And we lost a lot of old timers to drug tests. You would have thought it was the kids, right, that was screwing around from high school and never knocked off the bullshit. But unfortunately, we lost a lot of people with, time in that lost their pensions and everything. Because once you fail a drug test, that's it. You're done.
Oh, there's no rehab, probationary period.
Nothing. No, do not collect pass go. Get the fuck out. They take everything out of your locker. You're done. I mean, no pension, no benefits, no nothing.
Wow, that's harsh. Yet you can fill up on McDonald's and Cheetos.
Well, right,
all
but
day
that's
long
a different. So what are these guys? Were they getting fired for? I mean, was it just every kind of drug or weed?
No. It's some wild story. So when I was a rookie cop in my first precinct, right, there was this female cop. She was a nasty bitch. And even in the summer, she wore long sleeve shirts, which was odd. And I remember one time I had a hospitalized prisoner that I had to watch, and she relieved me from my hour break. And when I came back, she had the prisoner uncuffed and she was playing dominoes with the prisoner's family. I'm like, what the fuck? This person can go right out the back door. I was like, it was such a bad, even as a rookie, I knew something wasn't right with her. She got dole tested, and I remember asking the delegate, I go, what did she test positive for? He goes, it would be easier to say that what she wasn't tested positive for, like heroin, crack, opiates, everything. So it just depends. another precinct I worked in, there was a guy who was on restricted duty, like light duty, and he looked high. I can't explain it. He always just had like a shit-eating grin on his face. What he would do is he had a heroin problem. What he would do is he would wait till the desk officer took his break. He would find the keys to the evidence locker. He would open it up and he would tear open the evidence bags with money in it. So if you lock somebody up, you voucher money or money gets vouchered. So one day while this is going on, the guy that ran the precinct club comes, because I was a practical joker, and he comes up to me and goes, "You're an asshole." And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Stop stamping dollar bills with the evidence stamp and using it in the fucking vending machines." He goes, "I'm getting crazy looks when I go to the bank." So I go, had I thought of that, I would have done that, but that's pretty funny. The guy with the drug problem was going into the evidence locker. If he found drugs, he'd keep the drugs. If he found money, he'd tear open the envelopes, take the cash, and he was that out of it that he was spending the money in the precinct vending machines.
Holy cow.
So wait, the story gets even weirder.
Oh, man.
So they're on to him now, right? That they suspect he's using drugs. They start following him around. They follow him before his shift starts up to Washington Heights. It's a big drug neighborhood. And they catch him with 2 stolen guns trying to sell them on the street for drugs or cash. So he gets arrested, loses his job. And I think he took a plea bargain that if he went to rehab, he wouldn't get that much of a hit with jail time, or maybe he'd avoid jail time. And I'll never forget, like 6 months after that, because it was a big deal in the precinct, the desk officer, I had an arrest in the precinct, and the desk officer's on the phone with someone. He gets off the phone and he goes, "You're not going to I just got the craziest call." And I said, "For what?" He goes, "There's some rehab down in Florida said he escaped. Like he went off the reservation, and if we see him, to call them." I'm like, "He's not coming back here. This would be the last fucking place he would come to." You know what I mean? But it happened.
Wow.
So there was a story I saw that you had on YouTube, which was about a shoplifter and some hand injuries.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that actually happens. Because, I worked with a guy whose father owned a pharmacy in the great city of Chicago. And interestingly, there would be, about every 6 months to give or take, some guys in nice suits would show up at the pharmacy, and they, he would stop everything he was doing and go and talk to them, and they never got robbed. Amazingly, they never got robbed. And they talk about the Chicago way. Well, so tell us about what happens, in certain establishments if you decide to be a little bit, as they say, the 5-finger discount.
Yeah. So growing up, before I was a cop, I grew up in the Bronx, and there was definitely a mob presence. And in my neighborhood, people didn't call the police for a lot of things. Like if you were fucking around with the wrong guy's sister, or you owed somebody money, someone was going to show up with an Abraham Lincoln mask and a baseball bat and give you a crack. So I knew about the mob before I was even a cop. But when I was a little boy, my dad worked in a wholesale meat place. So on Sundays, he would bring me to work, and I would make chop meat, like the most dangerous machines in the world, right? I'm 13, 14 years old, and I'm feeding raw pork into a sausage machine and making chop meat. But I grew up fast. And this place was owned by organized crime. I didn't know. And one day my father said, it was a large wholesale place, and my dad sent me up to the second floor to get something. And I'm going up the stairs, and a man comes bouncing down the concrete stairs. No, help, screaming. And he almost hit me. So he's laying at the bottom of the stairs like he's got Parkinson's, like his hands are all fucked up. And he's begging me for help. And his whole mouth he's got blue paint on his mouth, right? And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Well, Carmine and Anthony, who work there, are coming down the stairs, and they're laughing. And they're like, "Oh, Vic, don't worry about him. He's an old friend of ours, right?" And they give the guy a kick in the kidney. And the guy's like, yeah. They pick him up, they drag him out like garbage, and they threw him in the street. So I run over to my father, who's cutting meat, and I go, "Dad, Carmine and Anthony just beat the fuck out of this guy and threw him down a flight of stairs." And Dad goes, "Just keep working. Don't worry about it. Don't say anything." He goes, "On the way home, I'll find out what happened." I said, "All right." Dad and I are coming home that night, and I go, "Dad, what happened with that man?" And he goes, "Some people just don't learn." And I go, "Learn what?" And he says, "Well, that guy's a shoplifter. They caught him once before. They gave him a couple of smacks, told him never to come back. Today they caught him shoving a slab of ribs down his pants. Carmine and Anthony brought him to the second floor. They beat his ass. They put his hands in a vice and broke his fingers. The guy started screaming he wanted a drink of water, so they poured a can of paint down his throat and threw him down the stairs. So I don't think he'll be coming back here anymore. I said, yeah, I don't think he should either. So my father goes, you know what? You're done. I don't want you coming to work with me anymore. And I was so hurt. It's like, I love going to work with my father because it was like a fucking 3-ring circus over there. He goes, no, he goes, you're getting too old. You're seeing things. I don't want you involved with these people. He goes, I got to work here. I need a job. I'm a butcher. I don't want this life for you. So yeah, I saw quite a bit as a kid before I was a cop.
Wow.
That just reminds me of Fargo when they threw that person in the wood chipper.
In the wood chipper, yeah. Yeah, that was. No, it is.
Maybe your dad ground some. Oh, there was that butcher in Fargo also chopped up that.
Oh, that was the Fargo TV show. Yeah, it's interesting though because
Body.
people don't understand. A lot of people, especially where we live, on the west side of the United States, we live in a rural area. They don't understand how much power the mob had. I mean, I remember reading, just Bill O'Reilly's book about the mob and how, during, the 30s and 40s, they had like control of 40% of the harbors in the city, maybe more. So every single thing imported into New York City, they got a cut.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, and how during World War II, because of their connections to Sicily, the U.S. government actually used mob ties to be able to infiltrate Italy through Sicily when we, eventually invaded Italy and then came up back, through Rome and liberated Rome. It was just absolutely amazing. People don't really, realize that there are these kind of sub-governments in a sense, especially in these gigantic cities. I had a patient who was a pit boss in Vegas in the 70s. And he said the stories he would tell me.
Oh, yeah.
Every single major casino was run by a city. Yeah. So, one would be Kansas City, one would be New York, one would be St. Louis. And they would call him and they'd say, go to the loading dock and there's a shipment. And so he would go to this loading dock and they would bring pallets of cash, like massive pallets of cash into the loading dock. And he would, supervise, make sure nobody was skimming or whatever. And then it would go into the casino and it was all mob money made from drugs and extortion and all of these, illegal businesses. And it would go into the casino and it would come out minty fresh. And he goes, that was 100% what Vegas was. He said the Bank of Nevada was completely infiltrated by these guys. I mean, it was essentially a legal criminal enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, the mob was in New York, you couldn't build a building or do construction without the concrete industry. And the mob, it was a cartel. They fixed the bids on things with the concrete. You couldn't pour concrete without them getting a cut. The mob, there's so many different ways they can squeeze you. Like, it's not like now, it's not like that anymore. You know what I mean? But when I was a kid and stuff, yeah, they ran New York basically.
Nuts.
No, it's just wild. I mean, to even try to comprehend that. But sometimes though, I look at the quote legitimate government and I kind of wonder who's more fair.
Well, I'll show you how they can shake down nickel and dime stuff too. So let's say for argument's sake, you own a pizza parlor and you make a deal with the Coca-Cola guy, and the Coca-Cola guy gives you the refrigerated case that says Coca-Cola on it. He gives you the Coca-Cola clock, right? Napkins, Coca-Cola, and you're getting your 2 liters of, I'm just making up numbers. A 2-liter bottle of Coke is $1, and your fountain soda is about a nickel, right? One day, some guy's going to come in. He's going to order a slice. He goes, you got Pepsi? No, I got Coke. I really like Pepsi. My cousin's the Pepsi guy. He's got the Pepsi route over here. Maybe you should try the Pepsi. No, Pepsi charges me $1.25, and you'd explain it to him. That's a shame. He leaves, right? One day you're coming in, you're opening up the next morning, and your canopy has been shredded. What the fuck, right? That guy shows up again. Hey, what happened? Your canopy got shredded. Yeah, I don't know, fucking kids or whatever. You got Pepsi? No, I told you this. I don't have Pepsi. I got Coke. That's a shame. One day you're closing up at 11 o'clock at night and a couple of young guys come in and start beating up your customers and you get smacked around. That guy shows up again. I heard you had a problem here. You know, maybe if you got Pepsi, you wouldn't have these problems. I'll look out for you. You should talk to my cousin. And that's how they get you to go along, you know? And then if you don't do it again, Abraham Lincoln and baseball bat might give you a shot in the head or you get your tires. They're just going to keep fucking with you until wearing you down until you go along. The same in New York with garbage. So in New York, they made more money with fucking garbage, believe it or not. So you own a business, right? New York City Department of Sanitation does not take commercial garbage, be it if you own a restaurant, a card store, whatever your business, the city of New York does not touch that garbage. So private sanitation has to take it. Well, the private sanitation companies in New York during that time were either owned by the mob or they had a deal with the mob. And the mob said it was very territorial. Certain families had different routes and you could not underbid. So if the three of us decided, fuck it, we're going to get a couple of garbage trucks and we're going to underbid these guys, you wind up getting killed. So they were into it. There's a lot of, believe it, and a lot of money in garbage. There was. I don't know if they're still doing it, but
that's insane.
Well, right. And then, you know, the famous story from the mid 90s or the early 90s where, you know, they had those garbage barges that they sailed off the coast of Jersey and just dumped into the ocean. And then these people are going to the Jersey Shore and there's like needles and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. And the landfills that aren't designed for medical waste, they would infiltrate that and fucking asbestos. Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez. I can't even imagine. So what's the name? Tell us the names of your books that you have out on the market.
Sure. My last book is called Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. It's got a picture of a kid in a Catholic high school uniform getting chased out of a confessional booth by a priest. That really happened to me. I was a smart ass and I got sent to Catholic high school. My book, NYPD Law and Disorder, that's about embarrassing moments and ridiculous things that happened during my time with the New York City Police Department. Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division. That's everything you wanted to know about the stolen car industry, who steals your car, what happens to your car in a chop shop, different scams, how they steal your car, where it goes, etc. The NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos. That's loaded with wild and embarrassing stories from a lot of my friends in the NYPD. What the hell else do I have? Oh, NYPD Through the Looking Glass, stories from inside America's largest police department. That's a humorous behind-the-scenes look at the job. And then finally, like I showed you guys earlier, Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways to Die. That's the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy.
I love it. Perfect ideas for Christmas gift shopping as well.
Absolutely. I mean,
this time of year,
who doesn't want Dickheads and Debauchery to be stuffed in their stocking, right?
I mean, come on. I think
that just begs for a stocking stuff.
We have to get our hands on. Being medical, we just seen all kinds of crazy stuff as well, like we talked about earlier. And we always say, I can't even imagine having to be the first responders to some of this stuff. Just going into some of the homes of these people to begin with, and you're walking into where they live and some of the slummy conditions, and we get to see them in a sterile environment, but then to have to show up to some of the crimes or medical emergencies as well, or deaths, and babysit them, like you said, for 8 hours until you wait for the coroner to show up.
Sometimes they run into the precinct. I remember one time later in my career, I had an arrest up in the West Bronx, and this kid comes running into the station house. He's got his hands like this, and he's screaming. I mean, blood-curdling screams, right? And the blood is just pumping out of both hands, and he's holding it, and he's trying to talk, but he can't. And he's like, you're getting every third word. So EMS shows up, right? And his hands start to stick because now the blood is starting to congeal on his face. So they had to pour, I don't know, saline or something to kind of separate it. And when he took his hands off his face, they opened up like fish gills. someone grabbed him and held his arms, and they came up with a razor or a knife, and they slashed his face. And his face just opened up like fish gills. And, you know, he wasn't talking. He would not give up who did it. But you could see bone. And like I said, yes, you're right. Sometimes we have to go to these places, but sometimes, like I told you earlier, with the woman getting shot in the leg, they just wander into the station house and like all hell breaks loose.
It just makes me think. It's funny how when it is a crisis, people of course don't think cogently, so it makes sense. And of course, if the police department's the closest thing in the neighborhood and not a hospital, they're going to run in there because police are supposed to help you. But it just makes me think of so many times we've been on call and people are calling us for domestic violence type stuff or things that they need to call the police for. And I remember this one girl's calling, freaking out, and I was on call, and she's like, my ex is pounding on the door, and he says he's going to kill my boyfriend that's in here, and we don't know what to do. And I'm like, why don't you call the police? You're calling the doctor on call. Like, what do you want me to do? Talk him off the ledge?
Warrants.
Exactly.
And it just weird stuff like that. We get these calls. I'm like, you're calling a doctor? Like,
yeah, well, it's because the last thing they want is the police to show up because then they all go to
anyway. Yeah,
There's
exactly.
a problem in that residence, and they don't want us there poking around because they know it's going to unravel.
Yeah,
good point.
It's
I was
awesome.
young and naive back then.
So, wow. Where can we find you social media wise, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So all my books are on Amazon. If you just go to Amazon, go to the book section and type in Vic Ferrari, like the car, all my books will come up. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Vic Ferrari 50.
Outstanding. This has been fun. We absolutely 100% will have you back.
I'd love to.
We will be in Florida in March. So we will look you up, and we got to go. We got to hang for sure. But I think we'll have you back on before that time because this has just been absolutely totally fun.
You guys can share auto racing stories.
Well, we can get into the chop shop stuff because that's a whole world that people don't even recognize how big a business that is. Just stealing catalytic converters is insane.
Dude, I worked on a case. They were shipping 30 stolen cars to Shanghai a month. So we had Chinese nationals that were running the thing. We had a Jamaican middleman he was getting the orders. They were paying him $5,000 a car. He was paying the thieves between $500 and $1,000 a car. The cars were going into a warehouse. They'd let the air out of the tires so the cars would sit low in the shipping container. They'd build a frame above it, put 2 more cars above it. Cars would get railed across the country to Long Beach, California, and shipped out to the Pacific Rim. So we're on multiple wiretaps. We've got the Asians' phones tapped. We got the Jamaicans' phone tapped. Our thieves were Spanish. Then we start figuring out that our car thieves were in the murder for hire business. So, I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, we could talk. I got tons of stories. So, yeah, whenever you want to have me back.
Tim needs to start his own auto podcast. I'm like, I reel him in to keep it medical. And anytime you can talk about rock and roll or auto stuff, he brings it in. But this has been great. I'd love to hear more stories. And people always are just happy to hear anything funny and uplifting and light.
Yeah, because, sitting for 8 hours with a dead body that's 350 pounds is incredibly uplifting.
Oh, man. I was a rookie cop. This is true. I was a rookie cop, South Bronx. I'm relieving I'm doing a midnight. So I'm relieving another rookie cop who was sitting with this dead guy, right, on the 4 to 12. And I go up to this man's apartment. He relieves me. And I mean, it's a hot apartment, no air conditioning. The poor guy is dead in the living room, right? And this is the first DOA I have. So I'm looking at photos, on his television set. I just want to get a feel of who this guy is, right? And there's a knock at the door. And I open the door, and it's another old man. And he goes, "Can I come in? It's my brother. I live upstairs." And I said, "Oh, yeah, of course. Come on in." And he starts talking to me, and he's telling me him and his brother grew up in North Carolina. They came up to New York. They both became bus drivers. They depend on each other. I don't know if they were married or divorced or whatever, but they have. So he goes into the refrigerator and he pulls out 2 beers. And he puts a beer down in front of me. I'm like, I'm on probation. Like, I could lose my job, please. He goes, "Son, I'm not drinking alone." So I'm sitting there with this man, this elderly gentleman, and we're drinking beer. there's this dead guy in the living room, right? The ME comes. He says, yeah, natural death. And I'll never forget, as I'm leaving, he goes to hand me another beer, and he goes, for the next time I see you. And I was like, almost like, I hope you're the one that has to do this again. I didn't, but it was the most eerie. Yeah, I've had a couple of those in my career with people that like, it was like, even at 22 years old, like that hit me. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I mean, I missed a lot of things in my 20s because I was like, going 100 miles an hour with the emergency brake on. Right, but yeah, that definitely hit me.
Yeah, I've had some creepy moments like that at work too, but what's his name? Dexter? Yeah. Jeez. That's nuts. Oh my gosh. Well, what a chilling end.
That was
I love it.
Perfect way to tie this up. This was just great, Vic. Thank you so much for your time. We'll link all those books in our show notes so that people can go straight to Amazon and it is I think I know. Look, Dickheads and Debauchery has to be a stocking stuffer for me. I mean, that just warms my cockles.
I think you'd like Grand Theft Auto because I mean, there's so many stories about how you steal cars. Like, do you know what ninja rocks are?
No.
So what junkies will do is they'll take spark plugs, and if you break a spark plug up into little pieces and you go like that, just flick it, it breaks car windows without even making any noise. So one time me and my partner was sitting up on this spot where people break into cars, and we watch this junkie, and he sits down on a park bench, and we see him going like this. And the next thing you know, he's in the car. I'm like, he didn't pick up a brick. I'm watching him with binoculars. I didn't see him use a tool. So we grab him. The window's broken, and heroin addict. And we got him in the station house, and I find the shards of spark plugs in his pocket, but I didn't think anything of it. And I'm like, dude, how'd you break into that car? And he's starting to go through a withdrawal. He goes, buy me a soda. So, with sugar, you could buy yourself a little bit of time before they go into withdrawal. So I got him a candy bar and a soda, and he goes, it's a ninja rock. I go, what the fuck is a ninja rock? And he explained it to me. Those little shards, if you just, at a low speed, at tempered glass, it will break the glass and not even make a sound. They're ingenious.
A new trick. I guess I'll keep them in my pocket for when I hit the water, the lake, and submerge my car in an accident so I can get out.
No, I think at that point you just want to roll the window down or wait till it fills and open the door. It will be probably a lot easier. Yeah. Outstanding. All right, Vic, thank you so much. We will have you back hopefully in the very near future. This has been super duper fun.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
Well, we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.